I only went in to have my appendix taken out. But when I came to, something felt off. The nurse helping me change said, "I'm so sorry. I didn't realize he hadn't told you." "Told me what?" I asked. She drew the curtain closed and whispered, "Your husband signed off on another surgery. One you never agreed to. Can you imagine going in for a routine surgery, kissing your husband goodbye, and waking up to discover he'd made a devastating, irreversible decision about your body while you were unconscious?" That's exactly what happened to me. He sterilized me. And in that moment, surrounded by the sterile smell of antiseptic, as a young nurse whispered a chilling secret, my entire world shattered. What followed wasn't just a medical scandal, it was a betrayal that would send shockwaves through our lives, destroy my marriage, and turn me into a person I never expected to become. I'm Claire, I'm 32 years old, and this is my story. The morning light filtered through our bedroom curtains in that particular way that made everything look softer than it really was. I remember thinking how perfect Thomas looked, even with his hair disheveled from sleep, as he reached across the bed to silence his alarm. We'd been married for 6 years, together for 9, and I still felt that little flutter when he smiled at me first thing. "Coffee?" he asked, already knowing the answer. It was our routine, he made the coffee, I made the bed. Simple, predictable, comfortable. That's how I would have described our life in that modern 2-bedroom apartment overlooking the city park. Thomas worked in finance, making numbers dance. I worked from our 2nd bedroom, editing manuscripts for a publishing house that went fully remote during the pandemic and never looked back. "Make it strong," I called after him. "I've got 3 manuscripts to get through today." "You always have 3 manuscripts," he laughed from the kitchen. I loved the sound of his laugh then. Now, remembering it makes my skin crawl. We were planning to start trying for a baby soon. Well, I was planning. Thomas always seemed to find reasons to push it back, his promotion, the economy, wanting to save more. But last month, he'd finally agreed. "After the holidays," he'd said, kissing my forehead. "We'll start our family after the holidays." The pain hit me at 9:47 a.m. I know the exact time because I was on a video call with an author, discussing revisions to chapter 12 of her novel, when suddenly it felt like someone had driven a hot knife into my abdomen. The laptop slipped from my lap as I doubled over, gasping. "Claire! Claire, are you okay?" The author's voice came tiny and distant through the speakers. I managed to end the call, then crawled to the bathroom, thinking I might vomit. The pain radiated from my right side, sharp and unrelenting. Food poisoning? No, we'd had the same dinner last night. Appendicitis. The word floated up through the haze of pain. My sister had appendicitis in college. This felt exactly how she described it. "Thomas!" I called out, but he was in his office, on a call. I texted him, "Something's wrong. Hospital. Now." He found me on the bathroom floor, tears streaming down my face. I'd never seen him move so fast, grabbing my purse, his keys, practically carrying me to the car. His hand found mine as he drove, squeezing gently at red lights. "It's going to be okay," he kept saying. "I've got you. I've got you." The emergency room was a blur of fluorescent lights and concerned faces. Thomas handled everything, the insurance cards, the paperwork, answering questions while I curled on the examination table, trying not to scream. The nurse who took my blood was gentle, warning me about the stick. The ultrasound tech apologized for the cold gel. Everyone was so kind, so careful with me. Acute appendicitis, the ER doctor confirmed after what felt like hours, but was probably only 45 minutes. "We need to get you into surgery today." The good news is we caught it before it ruptured. Thomas was right there, holding my hand, asking all the right questions. How long would the surgery take? What was the recovery time? Were there any risks? He took notes on his phone, thorough as always. I loved how he took care of me, took care of everything. I trusted him completely. They admitted me and moved me to a pre-op room. The surgical nurse, an older woman with kind eyes behind thick glasses, came in with a clipboard full of papers. "Just need to go over the procedure and get your consent," she said, then paused, squinting at her paperwork. "I just need to confirm both procedures that will be." "We already discussed this with the doctor," Thomas interrupted, his hand tightening on my shoulder. "She's in a lot of pain. Can we move this along?" The nurse looked uncertain, but nodded. "Of course. I'll just need her signature here." "I can help her," Thomas said, guiding my hand to the signature line. The pain medication they'd given me was making everything fuzzy. I scribbled something that vaguely resembled my name. "What second procedure?" I tried to ask, but my tongue felt thick, uncooperative. "Shh, baby, don't worry about it. Just rest." Thomas kissed my forehead. "I'll be right here when you wake up." They wheeled me toward the operating room. The anesthesiologist was explaining something about counting backward from 10, but I was still trying to form the question, "What second procedure?" The mask came down over my face and the world started to fade. "You're in good hands," someone said. "Just rest." 10, 9. 8. What second procedure? 7. 6. The world went dark. I woke up slowly, like swimming up from the bottom of a deep pool. My throat was dry, scratchy from the breathing tube. The recovery room was dim, quiet, except for the steady beep of monitors. A nurse, different from before, younger, with intricate braids pulled back in a ponytail, was adjusting my fore. "There she is," she said warmly. "How are you feeling, Claire?" "Thirsty," I croaked. "That's normal. I'm Kelsey. I'll be taking care of you today." She helped me take small sips of water from a straw. "The surgery went well. You're going to be just fine." I tried to sit up and gasped. There was pain, yes, but not just where I expected it. My whole pelvic region ached with a deep, unfamiliar soreness. Kelsey noticed my wince. "That pain will go away in a few days," she said. But something in her expression shifted. She looked uncomfortable, maybe even troubled. "It hurts down there," I said, gesturing vaguely. "That's not. Is that normal for appendicitis?" Kelsey's hand stilled on my hairline. She glanced toward the door, then back at me. "Didn't they tell you about the second procedure?" The question hit me like cold water. I shook my head, suddenly very awake despite the lingering anesthesia. "What second procedure? What are you talking about?" Kelsey pulled the curtain closed around my bed, creating a small pocket of privacy. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Your husband approved a second surgery, one you never consented to." The monitor beside my bed started beeping faster, tracking my accelerating heart rate. "What? What surgery? Where is Thomas? I need to talk to Thomas." "Ma'am, please try to stay calm." "Don't tell me to stay calm." I fumbled for my phone on the bedside table, nearly knocking over the water cup. My hands were shaking as I called Thomas. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Voicemail. "I need to know what was done to me," I said, my voice rising. "I have a right to know what was done to my body." Kelsey bit her lip, clearly wrestling with something. "I'm not legally allowed to discuss medical details without the attending surgeon present." "But..." She looked toward the door again. "Dr. Anders should be making rounds soon. Please," I begged. "Please just tell me." She shook her head. "I could lose my job. But I'll make sure Dr. Anders comes to see you right away." It was another hour before Dr. Anders appeared. The longest hour of my life. I called Thomas 6 more times. Nothing. I texted Julie, my best friend, but couldn't figure out how to explain what was happening when I didn't understand it myself. Dr. Anders was a tall man with silver hair and the kind of confident bearing that probably reassured most patients. It made me want to scream. "Mrs. Morrison," he said, pulling up a chair beside my bed. "How are you feeling? What did you do to me?" I demanded. "What was the second procedure?" He cleared his throat, adjusting his white coat. "I think it's best if you focus on healing first. We can discuss the details when you're feeling stronger." "Tell me now." He sighed, pulling out a tablet. "Your husband expressed concerns about a long-term gynecological issue. During the appendectomy, we also performed a minor procedure to address it. It's all documented here, with the proper consent form signed." "What procedure?" My voice was barely a whisper now. "A tubal ligation," he said, as if announcing the weather. "Your husband said you discussed it extensively, that you'd been planning it for months but were nervous about the procedure. We thought it best to take care of it while you were already under anesthesia to spare you additional anxiety." The room tilted. I gripped the bed rails to keep from falling, even though I was lying down. You sterilized me." "It's a very common procedure, Mrs. Morrison. Completely reversible through IVF, if you change your mind about children." "Get out!" The words came out as a growl. "Get out!" He stood, looking mildly offended. "I understand you're upset, but everything was done according to protocol. Your husband had full medical power of attorney and—" "Get out!" After he left, I lay there shaking. Kelsey returned, her face full of sympathy. Without a word, she handed me a manila folder. "I shouldn't be doing this," she whispered. "But you deserve to see it." Inside was a copy of the surgical consent form. There was my signature, except it wasn't. The letters were all wrong. The Y in my last name curved when mine was always straight. The C in Claire, too narrow. And there in the procedure description, bilateral tubal ligation via laparoscopic approach, below it, Thomas's signature, clear and confident, and a note, * patient's husband confirms previous discussions regarding permanent birth control. Patient experiences anxiety regarding separate procedure. Recommends completion during appendectomy. *. I stared at the words until they blurred. Why would he do this without asking me? The question echoed in the silence of the hospital room, unanswered and unbearable. Thomas arrived the next morning with flowers, white roses, my favorite. He was smiling, that easy, charming smile that had made me fall in love with him at a bookstore cafe 9 years ago. He kissed my forehead, set the flowers on the nightstand, and asked how I was feeling, as if this was any other hospital visit, any other day. "What did you do?" My voice was flat, emotionless. I'd cried all night, and now there was nothing left but a hollow fury. His smile faltered slightly. "What do you mean, baby?" "I've been in meetings all morning. I'm sorry I couldn't come last night, but the Peterson deal. The surgery, Thomas. The tubal ligation. What did you do?" He pulled the visitor's chair closer to my bed, his expression shifting to one of concern, not surprise, concern. He'd been expecting this conversation. "Claire, honey, you're still groggy from the anesthesia. You're confused." "I'm not confused." I held up the surgical papers Kelsey had given me. "You authorized them to sterilize me without my consent. Without even telling me." Thomas sighed, running a hand through his hair, a gesture I used to find endearing. "Claire, we talked about this. You were so scared of childbirth. Remember that panic attack you had a few weeks ago when Sarah brought her baby to dinner? You said you couldn't do it, that the thought of being pregnant terrified you. That never happened." My voice was rising. "Sarah hasn't visited in months, and I want children. We were going to start trying after the holidays." "You said, baby, you've been under a lot of stress with work," he interrupted, his voice taking on that patient, patronizing tone I was only now recognizing had always been there. You've been emotional, confused. I did what was best for both of us. For our future. Our future? You took away my choice. I protected you from making a decision you'd regret, he said firmly. Children would ruin everything we've built. Our lifestyle, your career, our relationship. You know this deep down. You're just feeling hormonal from the surgery. Hormonal? He actually said hormonal? Get out, I said quietly. Claire, don't be dramatic. Get out. He stood, straightening his tie, even now worried about appearances. I'll come back when you're feeling more rational. We can discuss this like adults. After he left, I called Julie. She answered on the first ring. Finally! I've been worried sick. How was the surgery? Julie, I couldn't get the words out at first. He had them sterilize me. Silence. Then, what? I told her everything, the second procedure, the forged signature, Thomas's gaslighting. She listened, her breathing getting heavier with each detail. That FING** bastard, she finally exploded. Claire, we literally talked about IVF 3 weeks ago. You showed me the fertility clinic websites you'd bookmarked. You were picking out baby names. I know, I whispered. But he's trying to make me think I'm crazy. You're not crazy. You're the sanest person I know. I'm coming to get you. The hospital discharged me that afternoon despite my protests that I didn't want to go home, but insurance wouldn't cover another night for a successful, uncomplicated procedure. Julie drove me home, staying close as we entered the apartment. Thomas wasn't there. Probably at work, crafting his narrative for anyone who would listen. We need to find proof, Julie said, helping me settle on the couch. Anything that shows he planned this. While she made tea, I opened my laptop, checking my email for any forgotten conversations about not wanting children. Nothing. My search history was full of fertility websites, pregnancy guides, baby name databases, all from the past 6 months. I screenshotted everything. Thomas's home office door was closed. It always was when he wasn't home, and I'd respected that boundary, believing he needed privacy for sensitive financial documents. Now, that respect felt like stupidity. It's locked, I told Julie, testing the handle. Where does he keep the key? I don't know. I've never needed it. We searched for an hour, under the doormat, above the doorframe, in every obvious hiding spot. Finally, Julie found it taped to the back of a picture frame in the hallway, our wedding photo. The office was meticulously organized. Everything in its place. File cabinets lined one wall, each drawer labeled with client names or years. But one drawer, bottom left, had a different kind of lock, a combination. Try your anniversary, Julie suggested. Nothing. His birthday? Nothing. I was about to give up when I remembered something. Early in our relationship, Thomas had told me about his lucky number, 2743. He used it for everything back then, before password managers and two-factor authentication. The lock clicked open. Inside were documents I'd never seen before, medical brochures about tubal ligation, printed articles about the child-free lifestyle, and then, my stomach dropped. An email chain. The emails were between Thomas and a doctor, Michael Brennan, dated 3 months ago. Thomas had inquired about options for permanent birth control for my wife and specifically asked about procedures that could be done without lengthy consultation periods. Dr. Brennan had responded that he couldn't perform such a procedure without the patient's explicit consent and proper counseling. Thomas had written back, "What if the patient is incapacitated or unable to make decisions? What are the legal options?" Dr. Brennan never responded to that one. There were more emails. Thomas reaching out to other doctors, other clinics. Most ignored him or sent firm rejections. But there, at the bottom of the stack, was a printed conversation with Dr. Anders from Riverside Medical Center, *R* Hospital. "I understand your concerns," Dr. Anders had written. If the patient were already undergoing surgery for another condition, and if proper consent forms were obtained, we could potentially address multiple issues in one procedure. This would, of course, require appropriate documentation. Thomas had replied, "What kind of documentation?" Spousal consent is sometimes accepted in emergency situations where the patient cannot consent themselves. The paperwork would need to be thorough. That's conspiracy. Julie breathed, reading over my shoulder. This is conspiracy to commit medical fraud. I took photos of everything with my phone, then carefully returned the documents to their exact positions. As I was closing the drawer, I noticed something else, a small black phone tucked behind the folders. A second phone I'd never seen before. It was password protected, but Thomas was predictable, 2743. The messages that appeared made me physically ill. There were dozens of texts between Thomas and someone saved as A. The most recent, from yesterday, "A, is it done?" Thomas, "Yes. She can't trap me now." "A, when are you leaving her?" Thomas, "Soon. Once things settle." I scrolled up, my hand shaking. The messages went back over a year. Photos appeared. Intimate photos of a woman I recognized, Amanda, from Thomas's office. I'd met her at the company Christmas party. She'd complimented my dress and asked about our plans for children. "You have to think about your career," she'd said. "Kids change everything." I thought she was just making conversation. One message thread from 2 months ago made me run to the bathroom to vomit. "Thomas, she wants kids desperately. It's becoming a problem." "A, so leave her." Thomas, "Not yet. The prenup has a clause about children. If we divorce without kids, she gets half of everything. If she's unable to have children due to medical reasons, it's different." "A, you're terrible." "I love it." Julie held my hair back as I heaved, then helped me back to the couch. "We need to get you a lawyer," she said. "Today." That night, I lay in our bed, my bed now, staring at the ceiling. The incision sites throbbed, a constant reminder of what had been taken from me. Not just my fertility, but my trust, my sense of safety, my belief in the life I thought I'd been living. I thought about the woman I'd been just 2 days ago, worried about manuscript deadlines and planning a future with a man I loved. She felt like a stranger now, naive and blind. Around midnight, I heard Thomas's key in the lock. I pretended to be asleep as he moved through the apartment, checking his office, had I left anything out of place, then sliding into bed beside me. He smelled like perfume. Amanda's, probably. "I know you're awake," he whispered. "We need to talk about this rationally, Claire. You're going to see that I did the right thing for both of us." I didn't respond. I barely breathed. "You'll thank me one day," he continued. "When you see how free we are, how much we can accomplish without kids holding us back. You'll understand." He rolled over and within minutes, his breathing deepened into sleep. I lay there rigid, planning my next move. He thought he'd won, that he'd successfully trapped me in his vision of our future. Standing in the bathroom an hour later, I stared at my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at me was different, harder, angrier, transformed by betrayal. I lifted my shirt, touching the small bandage over one of the laparoscopic incisions. Such a small mark for such a massive violation. "You stole something from me," I whispered to Thomas's sleeping form through the doorway. "And now I'm going to take everything from you." The law office of Sarah Chen and Associates occupied the top floor of a gleaming downtown building. Julie had found Sarah through a friend who'd used her for a contentious divorce. "She's brilliant and she's ruthless," Julie had said. "Everything you need right now." Sarah Chen was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 40s, with sharp eyes behind designer glasses and an air of controlled intensity. She listened to my story without interrupting, occasionally jotting notes on a legal pad. When I finished, she set down her pen and leaned back. "This is one of the most egregious cases of medical battery and spousal betrayal I've encountered," she said. "We're talking about conspiracy to commit fraud, forgery, and unauthorized surgery. The hospital has significant liability here, and your husband." She paused. "Your husband committed multiple felonies. Can you prove it?" I asked. "With what you've shown me, yes. But we need more. I want you to document everything, every conversation, every piece of evidence. And Claire," she looked at me intently, "be very careful. Men who are capable of this level of deception and control can become dangerous when cornered." I went home and became a detective in my own life. While Thomas was at work, I systematically photographed every document in his office. I discovered our finances were more complex than I'd realized. Beyond our joint accounts, Thomas had been moving money into private investments I'd never heard of. One account had over $200,000 I didn't know existed. The burner phone became my obsession. I checked it daily while he showered, screenshotting conversations. The relationship with Amanda went deeper than just an affair. They'd been planning a future together, one that never included me as anything more than a temporary obstacle. 3 days after I'd returned home, I found something that made my blood run cold. In the phone's video folder was a recording from inside Dr. Anders's office. Thomas must have secretly recorded their consultation. The angle was awkward, clearly filmed from a pocket, but the audio was crystal clear. "She doesn't know I'm here," Thomas's voice said. "She's emotional about the topic of children. Irrational, even." "I understand," Dr. Anders replied. "But we need to be very careful about how we proceed." "I'll take full responsibility," Thomas continued. "Just make sure she doesn't remember the specifics." "Can you increase the anesthesia?" "That's not how anesthesia works, Mr. Morrison." "Then what do you suggest?" "If she's already consented to one procedure, the paperwork could be adjusted. These things happen in emergency situations. Decisions have to be made quickly." "And you've done this before?" A pause. "I've helped families make difficult decisions." "Yes." I copied the video to 3 different cloud storage accounts and emailed it to Sarah Chen immediately. "This is a smoking gun," she said when she called me back. "This proves premeditation and conspiracy. But Claire, I need you to do something that might be difficult. Can you pretend everything is normal for a little while longer? We need him to feel secure while we build the case." So, I became an actress. When Thomas came home, I apologized for my emotional outburst at the hospital. I let him explain again how he'd done what was best for us. I nodded and smiled and let him kiss my forehead, all while documenting everything. "I'm glad you're coming around," he said one evening over dinner I'd cooked while fantasizing about grinding glass into his pasta. "I knew you'd see reason eventually." "You always do." "I've been thinking," I said carefully. "Maybe you're right about kids. Maybe I was just following social expectations rather than what I really wanted." He beamed, reaching across the table to take my hand. "That's my smart girl. See, this is why I had to make the decision for you. You were too caught up in what everyone else wanted." I smiled back, squeezing his hand while mentally adding his words to the growing transcript I was keeping of every conversation. Julie helped me maintain the facade, though she could barely contain her disgust. "I don't know how you're doing this," she said one afternoon as we sat in a cafe far from Thomas's office. "I want to kill him every time I see him. Anger keeps me focused," I told her. "Every lie he tells, every manipulation, it's all evidence." A week into my performance, I made a discovery that changed everything. I'd gone back to the hospital, supposedly for a follow-up appointment, but really to request my complete medical records. The clerk handed me a thick folder, and there, buried in the administrative notes, was something odd, a payment record showing that Thomas had paid $15,000 directly to Dr. Anders's Personal Medical Consulting LLC the day before my surgery. Sarah Chen's eyes lit up when I showed her. This establishes quid pro quo. He literally bought your sterilization. We decided it was time to act. Sarah prepared the lawsuit, actually, lawsuits plural. One against Thomas for fraud, assault, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Another against the hospital and Dr. Anders for medical malpractice and battery. She also began preparing divorce papers. We're going to file everything simultaneously, she explained. He won't know what hit him. The plan was to serve Thomas at a dinner I'd carefully orchestrated. I told him I wanted to celebrate our new beginning with a special meal at home. I spent the day cooking his favorite foods, setting the table with our wedding china, playing the perfect wife one last time. He arrived home with champagne. You seem so much happier, he said, kissing me. I knew you'd come to understand this was for the best. We sat down to dinner. I poured the champagne, raised my glass. To the future, I said. To our future, he corrected, clinking his glass against mine. That's when I stood up and walked to the living room. I want to show you something. On our large TV screen, I queued up the hospital security footage that Sarah had obtained through legal discovery. It showed Thomas at the nurse's station, signing papers. The timestamp showed I was already in surgery. What is this? His voice was tight. Keep watching. The video zoomed in. Sarah had it enhanced, clearly showing him signing a consent form where my signature was already present, a signature he'd forged before arriving at the hospital. Thomas stood up, his face flushing. You're being dramatic again. This doesn't prove anything. You probably signed it earlier and forgot. I have the video from Dr. Anders's office, too, I said calmly. The one where you discuss how to do this without my knowledge. He went very still. And the emails. And the texts with Amanda. And the payment records. Claire. The doorbell rang. I'd timed it perfectly. You should get that, I said. He moved toward the door like a man walking to his execution. The process server was professional, handing him the envelope and confirming his identity before leaving. Thomas tore open the envelope, his face cycling through emotions as he read, confusion, anger, fear. You can't do this, he said. You're my wife. We're a team. We were never a team, I replied. A team makes decisions together. A team respects each other. You made me into something else entirely. Your victim. But I'm done being your victim. I walked upstairs, my legs steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. He followed, shouting, Now, you're insane. No one will believe you. I'll tell everyone you're having a mental breakdown. I paused at our bedroom door. My bedroom door. They'll believe the evidence. They'll believe the forged signatures, the bribes, the conspiracy. They'll believe the woman you betrayed in the cruelest way possible. This will ruin me, he said. And for the first time, I heard real fear in his voice. Yes, I said simply. It will. I closed the door on his protests, locking it behind me. Through the wood, I could hear him raging, threatening, pleading. Eventually, his voice faded as he retreated to his office, probably to call his lawyer or Amanda, or both. I sat on the bed, my hands finally starting to shake as the adrenaline faded. The woman I'd been before would have cried. Would have second-guessed herself, would have wondered if she was being too harsh. But that woman was gone, surgically removed along with my fallopian tubes. In her place was someone harder, someone who understood that trust could be weaponized, that love could be a trap, that the person who promised to protect you could be the one who destroyed you. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah Chen, complaint filed with the medical board. Dr. Anders will be notified tomorrow. The hospital's legal team has also been contacted. Game on. I looked out the window, watching Thomas's shadow pace in his office across the hall. He thought he was so clever, planning my sterilization like a financial transaction, removing my choices like items from a spreadsheet. But he'd made one crucial mistake. He'd assumed I would break. That I would accept his version of reality. That I would thank him one day, as he'd predicted. Instead, I'd become something he never expected, my own advocate, my own defender, my own voice. And I was just getting started. The scar on my abdomen throbbed, a reminder of what had been taken. But scars, I was learning, weren't just markers of wounds. They were proof of survival, evidence of battles fought, maps of the journey from victim to survivor. Tomorrow, the real fight would begin. Tonight, I sat in the darkness of my room, planning my next moves, building my case, reclaiming my story. Thomas was still pacing in his office, probably calling his lawyer, maybe calling Amanda. Definitely panicking. Good, I thought. Let him pace. Let him panic. Let him feel for once what it was like to have control ripped away. To have someone else decide your future without your consent. The moon cast shadows through the bedroom window, and I found myself thinking about the children I'd never have, at least, not naturally. That grief would come, I knew, in waves and unexpected moments. But right now, I had work to do, justice to pursue, a man to destroy. You didn't just take away my right to be a mother, I whispered to the darkness. You made me something else entirely. A fighter, a survivor, and his worst nightmare. The restraining order arrived 3 days after I'd served Thomas with divorce papers. I was having coffee with Julie when the sheriff knocked on my door, his expression apologetic but professional as he handed me the documents. Thomas Morrison has filed for an emergency protective order, the papers read. Petitioner states that respondent has exhibited increasingly erratic and aggressive behavior, including threats of violence and deliberate attempts to destroy petitioner's reputation and career through false allegations. Julie laughed bitterly. The FING asterisk audacity. Sarah Chun was less amused when I called her. This is a common tactic, she said, her voice tight with controlled anger. He's trying to establish a narrative that you're unstable. It's also meant to intimidate you. Don't let it work. The restraining order meant I had to move out of our apartment immediately. Julie helped me pack while Thomas was at work, or what was left of his work. Word had gotten out about the lawsuit, and his firm had placed him on administrative leave pending investigation. Good, I thought, folding my clothes into suitcases. Let him explain to his colleagues how he paid a doctor to sterilize his wife. The temporary hearing for the restraining order was my first time seeing Thomas since that night. He sat with his lawyer, a sharp-faced man named Richard Brennan, who specialized in defending wealthy men from vindictive wives. Thomas wore his best suit, his wedding ring still on his finger, a performance of the devoted husband wronged by his mentally ill wife. My client has been subjected to a campaign of harassment and defamation, Brennan began. Mrs. Morrison has made wild accusations, violated his privacy by stealing personal documents, and created elaborate conspiracy theories about medical procedures she herself consented to. Sarah stood, her voice cutting through his narrative like a blade. Your Honor, we have video evidence of Mr. Morrison conspiring with Dr. Anders to perform an unauthorized surgery. We have proof of forged signatures. We have payment records showing he bribed medical staff. This restraining order is nothing more than an attempt to silence my client and prevent her from seeking justice. The judge, an older woman with piercing eyes, reviewed the evidence. Mr. Brennan, has your client seen this video? Thomas whispered urgently to his lawyer. Brennan stood. We question the authenticity of any such recording and request time to review. I'll review it now, the judge said. The courtroom was silent except for Thomas's voice coming from the laptop speakers, discussing with Dr. Anders how to sterilize me without my knowledge. I watched Thomas's face as his own words condemned him. The mask of the wronged husband cracked, revealing something uglier underneath. Fear. The request for a restraining order is denied, the judge announced. Furthermore, I'm forwarding this evidence to the district attorney's office for review of possible criminal charges. Mr. Morrison, you are advised not to contact Mrs. Morrison except through legal counsel. Thomas stormed out, Brennan hurrying after him. Sarah squeezed my shoulder. Round 1 to us. The media picked up the story a week later. Woman sues hospital after husband authorizes secret sterilization, read the headline in the local paper. My phone rang constantly, reporters, producers, strangers offering support or judgment. I gave one carefully controlled interview to a respected journalist, keeping my voice steady as I explained what had been done to me. This isn't just about me, I said, looking directly into the camera. This is about every woman who's been told she's hysterical, every patient whose consent has been violated, every person whose partner has made unilateral decisions about their body. We deserve autonomy. We deserve the truth. The hospital responded immediately, releasing a statement about their commitment to patient safety and announcing an internal investigation. Dr. Anders was suspended pending review, though he maintained through his lawyer that he'd followed standard protocols. Then Kelsey called me. I'm not supposed to be talking to you, she whispered. But you need to know something. This isn't the first time. We met at a diner outside the city, Kelsey nervously checking over her shoulder as she slid into the booth across from me. Dr. Anders has done this before, she said. 3 times that I know of. Always women whose husbands had concerns. Always during other procedures. The hospital knows. Why didn't you report it? She laughed bitterly. I tried. They said I was misunderstanding the situations, that the procedures were medically necessary. One nurse who pushed too hard got fired for violating patient privacy. But I kept copies of things. Documents. Emails. I've been waiting for someone brave enough to fight back. She slid a flash drive across the table. Everything's on there. Be careful. Dr. Anders has connections. Wealthy patients who've paid him well for his flexibility. The files on the drive were damning. 3 other women, all sterilized during routine surgeries, all with suspicious consent forms. One had killed herself 2 years later after discovering what had been done. Another had divorced her husband but never pursued legal action, too traumatized to fight. The third had been told she was crazy so many times that she checked herself into a psychiatric facility. Sarah Chun's eyes went dark when I showed her. This establishes a pattern of criminal behavior. We're not just suing anymore, Claire. We're going to destroy him. The discovery phase of the lawsuit was revealing. Through subpoenas, we obtained years of Dr. Anders's financial records, showing multiple large deposits from wealthy husbands around the times of their wives' surgeries. We found emails between hospital administrators discussing the liability issues of Dr. Anders's practices, while simultaneously praising his ability to attract high-value patients. Thomas's deposition was scheduled for a Thursday morning. I sat in Sarah's office, watching through video link as he was questioned under oath. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. His hair was unkempt, his suit wrinkled. Amanda, I'd heard through the grapevine, had ended things when the media attention started. Mr. Morrison, Sarah began, did you or did you not pay Dr. Anders $15,000 the day before your wife's surgery? It was a consultation fee, Thomas replied. A consultation about what? Medical options. What kind of medical options? I don't recall specifically. Sarah pulled out the video transcript. Let me refresh your memory. You said, make sure she doesn't remember the specifics. What specifics were you referring to? Thomas's lawyer objected. The objection was overruled. I was concerned about my wife's mental state, Thomas said. She'd been erratic. Define erratic. She wanted children. Wanting children is erratic. The way she wanted them was obsessively. Constantly. Sarah pulled out printed screenshots. These are from your wife's search history. Would you say researching baby names is obsessive? Yes. What about looking at fertility clinics? That's what I mean. She was fixated. Mr. Morrison, did you ever explicitly tell your wife you didn't want children? A pause. Not in so many words. So instead of having a conversation with your wife about not wanting children, you chose to have her sterilized without her knowledge? I chose to protect our future by violating her bodily autonomy, by making a difficult decision she couldn't make herself, because she disagreed with you. Thomas slammed his hand on the table. Because she would have ruined everything. My career, our lifestyle, everything I'd built. Children would have destroyed us, and she was too naive to see it. The court reporter typed his words carefully, each keystroke another nail in his coffin. Sarah smiled coldly. No further questions. The criminal investigation moved forward parallel to our civil case. The DA's office, faced with mounting evidence and public pressure, filed charges against both Thomas and Dr. Anders: fraud, conspiracy, assault. The medical board fast-tracked their review of Dr. Anders's license. Then came an unexpected phone call. Richard Brennan wanted to meet. My client is prepared to offer a settlement, he said, sitting across from Sarah and me in her conference room. Full divorce, no contest. He'll give up all claims to shared assets, the apartment, the investments, everything. In exchange, you drop the criminal charges and sign an NDA. No, I said before Sarah could respond. Claire, perhaps we should discuss, Brennan started. No, I repeated. He doesn't get to buy his way out of this. He doesn't get to silence me. And those other women Dr. Anders hurt, they deserve justice, too. Brennan gathered his papers. You're making a mistake, Mrs. Morrison. Thomas has resources. He can make this very difficult for you. He already has, I replied. And I'm still here. After he left, Sarah looked at me with something like pride. You know, this means a longer fight, more publicity, more pain. I know, I said. But I'm not just fighting for me anymore. The other women Kelsey had identified began coming forward. 2 of them joined our lawsuit, turning it into a class action against the hospital. The woman who'd attempted suicide sent a written statement that was so powerful, the judge allowed it to be read into the record despite her inability to testify in person. Dr. Anders broke first, facing multiple criminal charges and the certainty of losing his license. He offered to testify against Thomas in exchange for a plea deal. The DA agreed to reduce charges. He'd still serve time, but less than the 20 years he was facing. His testimony was devastating. He detailed how Thomas had approached him, how they'd planned the surgery, how Thomas had specifically requested that I be kept uninformed. He produced emails Thomas had sent him afterward, thanking him for his discretion and promising referrals of other difficult situations. He said his wife was becoming inconvenient. Dr. Anders testified that pregnancy would trap him in the marriage. He needed her sterilized to protect his assets and a future divorce. I sat in the gallery, my hands clenched in my lap, as the man who'd violated me on an operating table finally told the truth. It didn't undo what he'd done, but there was something cathartic about hearing him admit it, publicly, under oath. Thomas's criminal trial began 3 months later. By then, his life had thoroughly unraveled. He'd been fired from his firm, his assets frozen pending the divorce settlement. Amanda, I'd heard through the grapevine, had ended things when the media attention started. His own family had distanced themselves, his mother calling me to apologize, crying about how she'd raised him better than this. The prosecution laid out their case methodically, the forged signatures, the bribes, the conspiracy, the violation of trust so profound that the prosecutor called it a betrayal of the most sacred bonds of marriage and medical ethics. Thomas took the stand in his own defense, still trying to paint himself as the misunderstood husband who'd made a difficult choice for an unstable wife. But under cross-examination, his story fell apart. He contradicted himself, lost his temper, revealed the depth of his narcissism and need for control. "You view your wife as property," the prosecutor said. "It wasn't a question." "I view my wife as my responsibility," Thomas replied. "Your responsibility to control? To protect? From what?" "From her own choices. From making mistakes." "And wanting children was a mistake?" "Yes." "So you corrected it?" "Yes." "Without her knowledge?" "It was necessary." "Without her consent?" Thomas paused, looking at me for the first time during the trial. Something flickered in his eyes, not remorse exactly, but perhaps the first understanding of what he'd actually done. "Yes," he said quietly. "Without her consent." The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. The day Thomas was sentenced to 8 years in prison, I didn't feel victorious. I sat in my car outside the courthouse, reporters knocking on my windows, and felt empty. Justice had been served, but my fallopian tubes were still gone. My ability to naturally conceive, still stolen. The future I'd imagined, still erased. Julie found me there an hour later, still sitting, still staring at nothing. "Come on," she said gently. "Let's get you home." Home was now a small apartment across the city. I'd sold our old place, unable to sleep in rooms where Thomas had plotted against me. The new space was smaller, but cleaner, somehow, untainted by betrayal. His conviction made national news. Husband in prison for conspiring to sterilize wife became a talking point on daytime television, a cautionary tale in medical ethics classes, a rallying cry for reproductive rights activists. I received hundreds of messages from women sharing their own stories of medical abuse, reproductive coercion, partners who'd sabotaged birth control or forced them into procedures they didn't want. I started a blog to share these stories anonymously when requested. It grew quickly, becoming a resource for women seeking information about patient rights, medical consent, and recognizing reproductive coercion. A publisher reached out about turning it into a book. I said, maybe later, when I could write about it without shaking. The hospital settled out of court for an amount I'm not allowed to disclose, but it was enough that I'd never have to work again if I didn't want to. I donated half to women's health organizations and kept the rest, not because I needed it, but because making them pay felt like another form of justice. Dr. Anders lost his medical license permanently and served 18 months in minimum security prison. I heard he now worked as a medical consultant for law firms, helping them understand malpractice cases. Ironic, really. Thomas's firm conducted an internal review after his conviction and discovered he'd been manipulating female colleagues for years, sabotaging promotions for women who wouldn't date him, spreading rumors about those who rejected his advances. 3 more lawsuits followed. His professional reputation wasn't just damaged, it was obliterated. But even with all of that, the trauma remained. It surfaced in unexpected moments, a sharp pain in my abdomen that sent me into panic attacks, thinking something else had been done to me without my knowledge. Doctor's appointments became ordeal. I'd insist on recording everything, on having Julie present, on reading every form 3 times before signing. "It's post-traumatic stress," my therapist, Dr. Martinez, explained. We worked through it slowly, session by session. The anger stage lasted months. I wrote letters to Thomas that I never sent, filling notebooks with rage. I took kickboxing classes, imagining his face on the punching bag. I screamed in my car with the windows up, letting out sounds I didn't know I could make. Then came the grief. It hit me one ordinary Tuesday at Target, walking past the baby section. I collapsed in the aisle, sobbing for the children I'd never carry, the choices that had been stolen, the future that had been rewritten without my permission. A kind employee helped me to a quiet room, bringing me water, sitting with me until Julie could come get me. "I don't even know if I would have had kids," I told Dr. Martinez. But he took away my right to decide. He stole my maybe. 6 months after the trial, I got a letter from prison. Thomas's handwriting on the envelope made my hands shake. Julie wanted to burn it unopened, but I needed to read it. Claire, it began, I've had time to think. What followed was not an apology, but an explanation, a justification dressed up as reflection. He wrote about his childhood, his fears, his need for control. He said he loved me, had always loved me, had done what he did out of love. Love? I said aloud to the empty room. He still thinks this was love. I kept reading. He wanted me to visit. He wanted to explain in person. He wanted me to understand that we could still have a future when he got out. I burned the letter in my sink, watching his words turn to ash. Then I called the prison and had myself added to the no-contact list. He could never write to me again. A year passed. I returned to work, not because I needed to, but because I missed books, missed authors, missed something in my life that wasn't about what had been done to me. My colleagues were carefully kind, never mentioning the trial unless I brought it up. My first author after returning was a woman writing about medical ethics. It felt like the universe's dark joke, but I was the perfect editor for it. Then Amanda contacted me. She sent an email through my lawyer asking to meet. Against Sarah's advice and Julie's loud protests, I agreed. We met at a coffee shop downtown. She looked terrible, thin, hollow-eyed, her designer clothes hanging loose. She didn't order anything, just sat across from me, fidgeting with her phone. He tried to do it to me, too, she said without preamble. Not surgery. I was too smart for that. But the control, the manipulation. He'd already started tracking my phone, showing up at my gym, telling people we worked with that I was unstable when I tried to break things off. Why are you telling me this? Because I need you to know that I didn't know about what he was planning for you. I thought he just didn't want kids with you. I didn't know he would. She trailed off. You thought he'd leave me for you? I said flatly. Yes. I was stupid and selfish and wrong. But I wasn't. I wouldn't have been okay with what he did. I wanted you to know that. I studied her, this woman who'd been willing to destroy my marriage but apparently drew the line at destroying my body. What do you want? Forgiveness? No. I want to testify in the civil case against him about the planning, the premeditation. I have texts where he talked about needing to solve the Claire problem. I thought he meant divorce. Now I know better. I took the flash drive she offered. Later, Sarah would use those texts to prove pattern behavior, helping 3 other women file charges against Thomas for various forms of coercion and abuse during his previous relationships I'd never known about. The flashbacks came mostly at night. I'd dream about the surgery, but in the dreams, I was awake, paralyzed, screaming silently as they cut into me. I'd wake gasping, checking my body for new scars, new violations. Sometimes I'd call Julie at 3 a.m. just to hear someone tell me I was safe. One particularly bad night, I found myself looking up tubal ligation reversals. The surgery was possible, but expensive, with no guarantee of success. IVF was an option, too, if I'd had my eggs frozen, which of course I hadn't, because I'd never known I'd need to. I could still be a mother. I told Dr. Martinez, through adoption or foster care. There are options. There are, she agreed. But you don't have to decide now. You don't have to decide ever. The point is that now the choice is yours again. The choice is mine. Such a simple phrase, but it took months to truly believe it. I started volunteering at a women's shelter, teaching resume writing and job interview skills. Many of the women there had their own stories of partners who'd controlled their bodies, their choices, their futures. We didn't talk about my story, this wasn't about me, but they knew. Sometimes that was enough. One woman, Maria, had been forced by her husband to have 5 children she hadn't wanted. He said children would keep me too busy to leave, she told me. He was almost right. Another, Kesha, had her birth control sabotaged repeatedly. He'd poke holes in condoms, flush my pills, said accidents happen, she said. 4 accidents. Apparently. These women became my community, my purpose. We were all rebuilding ourselves from the ground up, creating new futures from the ashes of the ones that had been burned. 2 years after the surgery, I stood in front of a congressional subcommittee, testifying about reproductive coercion and medical consent laws. I wore a suit I'd bought specifically for the occasion, professional, but not trying to hide who I was, a survivor, an advocate, a woman who refused to be silenced. Current laws are insufficient, I said into the microphone, my voice steady. They allow for loopholes that predators exploit. They prioritize family unity over individual autonomy. They fail to protect patients from the very people who are supposed to care for them, both medical professionals and intimate partners. I propose specific changes: mandatory waiting periods for elective sterilization, requirements for video-recorded consent, criminal penalties for medical professionals who perform procedures without proper authorization. The committee listened, asked questions, took notes. Whether anything would come of it remained to be seen, but I'd said my piece. After the hearing, a senator pulled me aside. "My daughter," she said quietly. Her ex-husband tried something similar. "Thank you for speaking up." These moments, these connections with other women who'd been controlled, violated, dismissed, became my fuel. I wasn't just Claire anymore. I was part of something larger. A movement of women refusing to let their bodies be battlegrounds for other people's desires. Thomas, I heard through the legal grapevine, was not doing well in prison. His need for control didn't translate well to an environment where he had none. He'd been moved twice for his own safety, had lost his appeal, and had been denied early parole consideration. Good, I thought, and felt no guilt about the satisfaction that gave me. The coastal town was nothing like the city I'd left behind. Ocean air replaced exhaust fumes. The sound of waves replaced sirens. I rented a small cottage overlooking the water, close enough to hear the sea at night, but far enough from the tourist areas to have privacy. It had been 3 years since the surgery, 1 year since Thomas's final appeal was denied. I'd stopped counting the days recently, a sign of healing, Dr. Martinez said. I still worked as an editor, but remotely now, choosing projects that sparked something in me. Currently, I was working with a woman writing about trauma recovery. "The body keeps the score," she'd written, "but we get to write the final chapter." I'd suggested she make that her title. The letter arrived on a Thursday. Not from Thomas, I'd made sure that was impossible, but from someone unexpected. The return address was from a women's correctional facility in Nevada. The sender, Linda Morrison, Thomas's mother. "Dear Claire," it began, the handwriting shaky, but determined. "You may wonder why I'm writing from prison. It's a story that might give you some closure, or perhaps just confirm what you've suspected." She went on to explain that she'd been imprisoned for attempting to poison Thomas's father 20 years ago. He'd been controlling, abusive, had forced her to have Thomas when she didn't want children. She'd snapped one day, put antifreeze in his coffee. He survived. She got 15 to 20 years. "I see now that my son became his father," she wrote. "I failed to protect you from the cycle. I couldn't break myself." Thomas learned that women were things to control, not people to respect. "I'm sorry for my part in creating the man who hurt you." I read the letter 3 times, then called Dr. Martinez for an emergency session. "How do you feel about this?" she asked. "I don't know. Angry. Sad. Validated. All of it. All of it is perfectly reasonable." I wrote back to Linda, not to forgive, that wasn't mine to give, but to acknowledge, to say I understood how patterns repeat, how violence breeds violence, how control becomes generational. We began corresponding, 2 women on opposite sides of Thomas's damage, finding strange solidarity in our shared experience of the Morrison men. My blog had evolved into a foundation, the Claire Morrison Center for Medical Autonomy. We provided legal resources, advocacy, and support for victims of reproductive coercion. The first office opened in the city I'd fled, a deliberate choice to reclaim that space. Julie ran it, fierce and protective of every woman who walked through the doors. I traveled back for the opening. My first time in the city since moving to the coast. Standing at the podium, looking at the crowd of survivors, advocates, and allies, I felt something shift in my chest. Not healing, exactly, but transformation. This center isn't about me, I said. It's about every person whose body has been treated as someone else's property. It's about changing the conversation from why didn't she leave to why did he think he had the right. It's about making sure what happened to me becomes legally impossible for anyone else. The Foundation's first major victory came 6 months later, the passage of Clare's Law in 3 states, requiring video-recorded consent for all sterilization procedures and criminalizing forgery of medical consent as a felony with mandatory prison time. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough, but it was a start. I began dating again, slowly, carefully. His name was Marcus, a widower who ran the local bookstore. He'd lost his wife to cancer, understood that some losses reshape you entirely. Our first dates were walks on the beach, talking about books, loss, the strange gift of starting over when you never wanted to. I need you to know, I told him early on, what happened to me, what I can't do. He listened to the whole story without interrupting, his face cycling through anger, sadness, and something protective, but not possessive. "Thank you for trusting me with this," he said finally. "And I need you to know I have 2 kids from my marriage. Teenagers. I'm not looking to have more. I'm just looking to be happy again. Maybe make you happy, too, if you let me." We took it slow. A year of dating before I let him stay the night. Another 6 months before I could be intimate without panic attacks. He was patient. Following my lead, never pushing. The first time we made love without me dissociating, I cried afterward. Not from sadness, but from the recognition that my body could still be mine, could still choose pleasure, could still trust. The adoption process began 2 years into my new life by the sea. Not because I needed to replace what was stolen, but because I'd always wanted to be a mother. And Thomas hadn't taken that desire, even if he'd taken the traditional path to it. I was approved as a single parent, though Marcus made it clear he'd be there however I needed. Her name was Sophia, 7 years old, removed from her home after medical neglect, bounced through 3 foster homes. She had trust issues, control issues, anger that reminded me of my own. Perfect, I thought. We understand each other. The day I brought her home, she stood in the doorway of her new room, painted ocean blue at her request, and asked, "Are you going to send me back?" "Never," I said. "You're stuck with me. Promise." Promise? She tested that promise for months, tantrums, running away, never far, always to the beach, breaking things to see if I'd give up. I didn't. Slowly, carefully, we built trust. She started calling me Mom 6 months in, casually, like it wasn't a miracle. A year later, at her school's mother-daughter breakfast, she introduced me to her teacher. "This is my mom. She chose me." The teacher smiled politely, not understanding the weight of those words. But I did. Choice. The thing that had been stolen from me, now freely given. I received word that Thomas had been badly beaten in prison, something about debts, respect, the kind of violence that happens when you can't control your environment. I waited to feel something, satisfaction, pity, anything. But there was nothing. He'd become irrelevant to my story. A footnote in a life I'd reclaimed and rewritten. Dr. Anders died of a heart attack 2 years after his release. The obituary mentioned his medical career, but not his crimes. I wrote my own version, posting it on the Foundation's website, making sure his victims were remembered, even if he tried to forget them. "How do you feel about his death?" Dr. Martinez asked. "Free," I said. Finally, completely free. The documentary about my case premiered at Sundance. I didn't watch it, living it once was enough, but I attended the Q&A afterward. A young medical student asked how healthcare providers could better protect patients. Believe women, I said simply. When a patient seems confused about a procedure, investigate. When a spouse speaks for their partner, insists on private conversations. When something feels wrong, trust that instinct. Kelsey, the nurse who warned me? She knew something was wrong. She risked her job to tell me the truth. Be like Kelsey. Kelsey was in the audience. She'd become a patient advocate, working to reform hospital consent procedures. We hugged after the screening, two women who'd fought a system designed to silence us. 5 years post-surgery, I stood on my beach, I thought of it as mine now, watching Sophia play in the waves. Marcus sat beside me, reading, comfortable in the silence we'd learned to share. My phone buzzed with a text from Julie. Another state had passed Claire's law. 7 down, 43 to go. I thought about the woman I'd been before, trusting, naive, dependent on Thomas for validation and direction. She was gone, as surely as my fallopian tubes. In her place stood someone harder but not bitter, cautious but not closed, scarred but not broken. Sophia ran up, dripping seawater, and hugged me despite my protests about getting wet. Mom, look what I found. She held up a perfect sand dollar, unbroken despite the waves. It's beautiful, baby. Can we keep it? Of course. It's yours. She ran back to the water, and I touched my abdomen, feeling the small scars that had faded to thin white lines. They told a story, but not my only story, not my final story. That night, I sat at my computer, writing the last chapter of my book. The publisher wanted a triumphant ending, a clear victory, but that wasn't my truth. My truth was messy, complicated, ongoing. Healing isn't a destination, I wrote. It's a choice you make every morning. Some days the anger returns, sharp and justified. Some days the grief overwhelms, mourning possibilities that were stolen. But every day I choose to keep going, keep fighting, keep building a life that's mine. They took away my choice once, but they didn't take away my voice. They didn't take away my ability to choose everything that came after. They didn't take away my power to transform trauma into purpose, pain into advocacy, silence into a roar that demands change. I am not grateful for what happened to me. I will never forgive those who conspired to violate my body and trust. But I am proud of who I've become in spite of them. I am proud of the laws changed, the women helped, the daughter chosen, the life rebuilt. This isn't a story about overcoming. It's a story about becoming. Becoming my own advocate, becoming my own protector, becoming my own voice, becoming the mother I chose to be, the partner I chose to be, the woman I chose to be. My name is Claire Morrison. 3 men tried to steal my future. They failed. This is my story, and I'm the only one who gets to write its ending. I saved the file, closed my laptop, and went to tuck Sophia into bed. She was reading with a flashlight under her covers, thinking I didn't know. 5 more minutes, I said, kissing her forehead. 10, she negotiated. 7. Deal. I stood in her doorway, watching her read. This child who'd chosen me as much as I'd chosen her. Down the hall, Marcus was making tea, humming off-key. Outside, the ocean continued its endless rhythm, unchanging and eternal. My phone lit up with a notification. Another woman had reached out to the foundation, seeking help, finding her voice. Tomorrow I'd respond. Tomorrow I'd fight again. Tomorrow I'd choose again. But tonight, I stood in the doorway of my daughter's room, in my house by the sea, in my life that I'd rebuilt piece by piece, choice by choice. The scars on my abdomen were barely visible now, but they were there, part of me, but not defining me. Mom! Sophia called out. Love you. Love you too, baby. I walked to my bedroom, past the window that overlooked the water. The moon was full, casting silver light on the waves, beautiful and powerful and completely indifferent to human drama. There was comfort in that, the reminder that the world was bigger than what had been done to me, that life persisted despite violation, that there was always another tide, another dawn, another chance to choose who we become. Thomas had thought he was taking away my future. Instead, he'd given me something he never intended, the knowledge of my own strength, the power of my own voice, the fierce determination to never let anyone choose for me again. I smiled, a real smile, not performed for anyone else's comfort. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new fights, new choices. But tonight, I was exactly where I'd chosen to be. They took away my choice, but they didn't take away my voice. And that voice now was mine alone. What would you do if the person you trusted most conspired to steal your future while you slept? Would you have the strength to fight back, or would the betrayal break you completely? If Claire's story of survival and justice moved you, please like this video and share your thoughts in the comments below.